latest on Caribbean cruises to kosher safaris, pilgrimages to Jewish Eastern Europe, and award-winning wines and international cuisine in sun-drenched Tel Aviv. Sit back and enjoy the trip with the travel edition of the Jerusalem Post podcast.
Waterloo. I don't know any more of the lyrics, actually.
Well, you can say Waterloo several times. However, it's very interesting that you mentioned that, because here in Israel, I went to my first concert since October 7, and I was like, is it appropriate to go? People here are down and whatever. I went, and it was a tribute to ABBA for an hour and a tribute to Queen for an hour. The place was packed and rockin', and I absolutely loved it. It was great, and they finished off the first set with the Eurovision winner that launched the career big time of ABBA, Waterloo.
So how many words do you know? Because I get stuck on Waterloo.
If you listen to the words, it's all about the relationship between two people. I'm assuming in the good old days it was a man and a woman, and they're talking about their relationship being their Waterloo, and that Napoleon surrendered. And it's about, I guess, relationships and who has to give way in the modern age.
Was Napoleon on a ship at the time?
Do you know what? That is an extremely good point and very clever.
So why have I said that? And why are we talking about Eurovision and Waterloo? Well, it's our cruising special. The 2024 cruising special.
I am very excited about our cruising special, but before we get into who the guests are on tonight's pod, there is actually a connection between the whole Eurovision thing, Waterloo, and cruising.
One of our favourite cruise lines that we have featured in the past on our podcast, Royal Caribbean, have decided to splash the cash a bit and have taken out two very large sponsorship deals recently. One of them is with Inter Miami Football Club.
Ooh.
Because they've launched their latest ship, Icon of the Seas, in Miami, so they've decided to sponsor Lionel Messi and all of his soccer friends. Lionel Messi was the ship's fairy godmother, or whatever they call them, and smashed the bottle of champagne on the ship. The other sponsorship deal is with Israel's favourite, Eurovision, which this year is in Malmö in Sweden.
Malmö. What Royal Caribbean are doing in addition to that sponsorship is they are, at the same weekend, having 4 sailings around Europe, all the way from Turkey to Southampton in the UK, that are going to be Eurovision themed. Now, they're not giving away too many details, but I'm assuming, for example, we might see some Euro-styled cocktails.
And Eurovision karaoke.
Now, that sounds great, but you're going to have to learn the words to Waterloo to start with.
But more importantly, for the final of Eurovision and the semi-finals, I think you will be able to watch them all live while cruising the Mediterranean.
Enough promoing of Royal Caribbean, and as they always say at this point, of course, there are many other wonderful cruise lines as well, and we're going to be discussing several of those over the next 30 to 60 minutes.
One of those cruise lines is MSC, which stands for Mediterranean Shipping Company, and we'll be talking to their Israeli CEO, Eyal.
We'll be hearing a couple of times from 2 women. We'll give you more details on their business a little bit later on. They work very closely with Haifa Port, amongst other places, and they'll be chipping in right at the end of this podcast with something rather special.
And talking of 2 ladies, we'll be talking about 2 royal ladies, Cunard and their ships, the Queen Elizabeth, the Queen Mary, and a new ship, and Princess Cruises.
So all of that to come after a little jingly thing.
This is the Jerusalem Post Podcast Travel Edition. Find us on Facebook, Instagram and Twitter at MarkDavidPod, or mail us at markdavidpod@gmail.com.
Dora, the Explorer.
My God. What was that?
Oh, I'm waiting for the next interview, so I thought I'd just sing something, which later on might prove to be slightly relevant in the most obscure, weird David way possible.
Well, I had an idea how to introduce it, but I think you've killed that now.
I said you could make fun of me. Yours is so much better than mine. That's because you're a man of the internet.
So why Dora the Explorer? Oh, I got you now. I'm with you.
You really didn't understand?
No.
Later on, it'll become clear with our guest. We might delete this bit. We might leave it in.
I'll leave it in. Whenever I make something really awful happen, you leave it in. So that is staying in.
Okay, here's Mark Gordon.
I was watching a TV show. You and I, we both love
Dora the Explorer.
Not that one. You and I, we both love a good detective story, don't we?
Murder mysteries are the best.
I was watching one called The Good Ship Murder.
Ooh.
It's about a cruise, and at each port someone gets murdered.
Sounds great.
And the singer on the ship is a detective, or a retired detective. So he goes and solves the murder.
Why are you telling us this now?
Apparently, it's filmed on board the MSC Virtuosa, which is one of MSC's new ships. MSC has been sailing out of Israel for a good few years now, and is one of the bigger companies in Israel. Let's find out a little bit more about MSC and how we cruise without being murdered.
And who's going to tell us all about this? Have you got the singing detective along?
No, we've got better than that. We've got Eyal Atias, who is the general manager for Israel of MSC Cruises.
We have, I think, the newest ships in the market. Last 5 years, we manufacture about 10 new ships. And we're talking about huge ships, approximately 160,000 tons and above, reaching 215 tons with the new models. And we are manufacturing simultaneously 3 different models of ships. Most of the new ships are also very environmental. They run with LNG, they save on gas emissions, carbon dioxide. One of our ships, the newest one, which was launched or christened in May 23, made an historical event by cruising for 3 days with 0 emission of carbon dioxide using bio-LNG, which is rare and very difficult to purchase and also expensive, but it showed that it can be done. The design of the ship is very special. It's a European-Italian design, which is different than our competitors a little bit, which have huge and wide models. We are more like a narrow silhouette, very hydrodynamic, a little bit sometimes also aerodynamic. The second thing, maybe for some people, the first thing is the culinary experience. We have 22 hours a day an open buffet, or you can choose our a la carte restaurants to eat breakfast, lunch, or dinner, or both. You can do both as well, and it doesn't matter. Everything is included in price, and you eat as much as you want, but also the quality of the food is exquisite. In the a la carte restaurants, we are providing various menus, and you can choose from a few courses or take all the courses in the menu. And very special and very tasty dishes. The main meal is dinner, where you have your own personal waiter that knows you from the beginning of the cruise to the end of the cruise with your private table. And you can sit, with yourself and your spouse or your family and have a nice quiet dinner that lasts at least 2 hours. And you have the waiter knows your names, you know what you like to eat, what you like to drink, what kind of wine to offer you, etc. Entertainment, we have a different production every night with maybe more than 30 artists on each production, Broadway-style production in our theaters. Most of our theaters are more than 1,000 seats. It's an experience. It's a show. In other places during the afternoon and evening and late evening, we have maybe 10 other shows running around, like a pianist, a saxophonist, a violinist, or some trio or duo or a team that sings, or a cabaret. And, you can wander around the ship, which is like 3 football fields long and maybe 2 wide, and experience from one bar to one lounge and a lot of things to do. Most important issue is the prices, because MSC's concept of prices is a little bit different than other cruise lines, especially because of the family concept. The children with MSC first are not 12 years old, they are up to 18, and they all get a reduction of approximately 60% from the adult rate, which is not the case with the other airlines, which they pay full price.
Can I just send my kids and I stay at home?
Your kids are over 18.
They have to be more than 18. But yes, if they're over the 18, they can get an extra discount for being 2 young people at the same cabin. Between 18 to 19, it's a specific. Even if you're more than 65, you have also a good discount.
Oh, that's good for David.
He looks 50.
Now that is funny.
It's a good job this is a podcast and not video. Mark, over to you.
Last year we spoke to Angelo Capurro on our cruising podcast, and we were talking about Musica sailing from Haifa, and we were talking about the launch of the MSC Euribia. What are the plans for Haifa in 2024?
Well, we had big plans for Haifa. You know that 22 was the starting year for us in Haifa with the Lyrica class. Being so successful, we introduced the Musica class which is a 3,000 passenger ship. It was also very, very successful because the demand exceeded the supply. And we had, for each cabin, we had two candidates or two customers asking for the same cabin. And we had big plans for 24, but then 7th of October happened. And we waited for about 2 months to think what to do with 24 cruises, the Musica. At the end of the day, because it's a mixed nationality cruise, it's like 1/3 Israelis and 2/3 of maybe 30, 40 nationalities. It was decided not to push it too long, and we canceled the 2024 operation. For 24, we don't have good news for Haifa, but we are back in 25 with the orchestra. We had some sales today. That's more than 1 year in advance.
We'll get on to orchestra in a minute, but before that, looking at 2024, and given that really, as far as we know, only the local Mano cruising company are going to be offering sailings, hopefully, out of Haifa, does that mean we're going to see a really big shift of Israelis going to cruise from overseas departure points, which I know cruise companies have been trying to head in that direction anyway, given that everybody realizes just how much Israelis enjoy cruising?
David, that the MSC in Israel is here more than 15 years. And 22 was the starting year from Haifa. And before we had quite a lot of passengers traveling from Israel to ports outside Israel international cruising. Actually, in 23, more than 45% of our production out of Israel was not from Haifa. Having said that, it is a challenge to sell more international cruises outside Israel. It's not always the same people who prefer to cruise from Haifa and those who prefer to cruise from outside Israel. But hopefully we will get there. We will probably introduce a flying cruise program pretty soon that we can also include a flight in the package. We have increased our inventory of ships in the last year, and we have a lot of ships and a lot of destinations and routes to sell.
Before you mentioned orchestra replacing Musica in 2025, any differences between the ships, anything that listeners who might want to book should know about orchestra?
They're actually sister vessels. They were built almost together, pretty much the same models, called the Musica class. There are 4 of them. Musica was the first one, and the name came from the first ship. A second one, it's a little bit newer, orchestra, but it's pretty much the same. It is, however, the largest vessel taking Israelis on a fixed rotation from Israel ever to introduce cruises out of Haifa. It's a 3,000 passenger ship. Still, I think it will be a huge demand for the orchestra. It's a great ship. And of course, not only the ship is important, also the service that we provide regarding why sail with MSC Cruise. Everything is also implemented on the orchestra.
Last year, MSC launched another brand called Explorer. What makes that different from a regular MSC cruise?
It's not only a different brand, it's also a subsidiary. It's not MSC Cruises, it's a different company. It is, however, branded as MSC. If you look at the logo or the mandala inside, you will see the MSC small logo inside. And this is, I think, a natural development for a company that has been in the market for the last 40, 50 years as a regular cruise line. Of course, all of our cruises are luxurious, but the Explorer, or more exactly the Explorer Journey is the brand, is a very special luxury brand. One of the reasons is the spacious cabins. If you take the same ship, which will occupy 2,500 passengers in the same magnitude of a ship, this one will have maybe 800 passengers. All of the cabins are luxurious suites, about 40 meters square. A regular cabin between 12 meters to 19 meters. You have here 39 to 40 meters, the smallest cabin, up to 150 square meters, which is huge. You have a 1-to-1 ratio from crew to passengers, which is rare. Usually on a cruise ship, you will have 3-to-1. Let's not forget the culinary concept, because you don't have a buffet. You have only 5 restaurants from different cuisines, Asia, a la carte restaurants, or French restaurants, or Mediterranean as well. You have a Michelin chef cooking periodically every 2 months. They're changing the chefs from famous chef Michelin restaurants in Europe. So he's coming into the ship, cooking his menu. It's all-inclusive concept. Even champagne is included in the price. Premium champagne, single malt whiskeys, etc. You have Rolex and Cartier shops on board. You have a very open and freestyle entertainment. When the entertainers and the artists, they are reacting or including the crowd or the audience within the show. And also the main concept of the cruise is slower, more immersive cruise. everybody takes the time. You spend more time in very specific or special destination. And the main thing is that these destinations are off the beaten path. It's not the regular destinations that you go to. So everything about the Explorer is more special, is more luxurious.
Where can people get more details on how to book an MSC cruise and any special offers you may have?
In Israel, we have a fully customized website in Hebrew and in English, of course. That is customized to the Israeli travelers because there are different rules and different conditions. You can get the full information regarding our ships with the videos and pictures and the destination and anything you need to have. Another way to reach us is, of course, through our dedicated call centers here locally in Israel, just 9*2019. You reach our multilinguistic team, which speaks English, Hebrew, and Russian. And of course, you can call any of the preferred cruise agencies in Israel. We are working with the agencies, we respect the agencies, and they are the most important customers for us. So these are the 3 ways you can contact us and make a booking. That's msccruises.co.il.
Eyal Attias, General Manager Israel for MSC. Thank you so much for joining us on the podcast.
Thank you very much, Mark and David. It was a pleasure to be here.
So, Mark.
Let me put my coffee down.
I think you're stuffing your face with something. But I gave you potato chips and you did actually just put one in your mouth as I turned on the microphone. Do you know what flavour that potato chip is?
It's salsa? Mesquite?
That direction, it's sriracha and honey.
Ooh, nice.
Or is it sriracha?
I think it's sriracha.
It's like scaramanga.
Or scratcher.
Yes. In the world of cruising and the broader world of travel, there are many companies that the public never really gets to hear about, to meet, because they're the logistics companies. They're the facilitators. They help market, they help advise the ports that you board, that you embark your ships from, and we're going to talk to one of those companies right now.
If you've listened to our previous cruising special, you'll have heard us talk to the head of cruising at Haifa Port, Zohar Rom. He introduced us to 2 people with years of experience and expertise in the cruising industry, and they founded a company to help advise others. The company is called Access Cruise Inc., and we are talking to Shannon McKee, who is the founder and president, and Linda Vasquez, who is the vice president of account development.
In a moment, we'll hear all about their vision for Haifa, its future, and how they can rebuild the port after everything that's happened over the last few months. But first, let's hear from Shannon as she explains a little bit about the company.
So Access Cruise was created as a sales and marketing firm that supports destinations, tour operators, basically anybody trying to connect with the cruise industry. And my history is I've been in the cruise industry 30 plus years now. And after 30 plus years, in which 20 of them were spent on the side of working within a cruise line, including in executive roles, I found that a lot of people come to you saying, oh my God, I would love to work with the cruise ships. How do I make that happen? And so that's really how it started. I had been working at Norwegian Cruise Line for almost 20 years. There was a transition and I took a step back from my role and people just started coming to me saying, we need your help, we need your help. And so I started the company. And a few years later, I brought Linda on. In fact, the time that Linda came on was the reason we brought Haifa and signed Haifa on as a client is when Linda joined me. So it's been a glorious, as she says, 8 years of working together. But the company's been in existence since 2010.
Linda, we'll get onto Haifa in a minute, but what types of people do you work with? Who are your clients?
I think our sweet spot is destination marketing. I think that, when I started to work with Shannon, this is what I call the fun and sexy side of the business. I was on the unfun and unsexy side of the business, which dealt with human resources, and humans are messy. So I was quite happy to get out of that business and find something new. So what I've learned in the 8 years in working with Shannon is that we don't focus on any one particular part of the world. We're careful to make sure that our clients, there's no conflict with each other in terms of where they are in the world and who they appeal to in that region of the world. But correct me if I'm wrong, Shannon, in general, we are focused on destination marketing. That is our superpower.
Yeah, I think that we really try to play into our strengths as humans and former cruise line executives. I spent a lot of time in entertainment, in the side onboard revenue, as well as on the shore excursion side. I know Linda just said she was in human resources, but over the years, as we've transformed and evolved, I think Linda goes back into it. The sweet spot is really destination marketing, although I do a lot of work on the entertainment and shore excursion side as well.
It would be remiss of us, especially since Haifa is one of your clients, and we've had Zohar from the port on several times on the pod, we must mention what's going on in Israel at the moment. And obviously the last few months have been incredibly difficult for the whole country and the cruising industry that was doing so well with Haifa as a port. It's all just gone. How do you get Haifa back where it should be?
So there's the $64,000 loaded question, isn't it?
You know, Linda, I think it goes back to some of our very first conversations when we started working with Zohar.
You're reading my mind, because I really don't know where else to start other than back at the beginning. Shannon and I have talked about this a few times. When I think about the amount of work that we did as a team, not just her and I, but the team at Haifa Port was very much a part of everything that we did. You know, when I think about all of the time and energy and effort that was spent in getting us to the point that we reached, and then to find where we're at now, the only thing I can think of is we have to go back to square one and start all over again. And I really don't think, without getting into a broader discussion, we can start until things settle down over there. There's really nothing you can do until things start to level off and there seems to be maybe a path forward for people to move in a direction. But you can't do that until that dust settles.
Yeah, I mean, I think it goes back to also that even when we started, Haifa was coming out of a geopolitical situation when we first started with them. And I remember I was hesitant to even think about taking on Haifa, and I had to do a lot more research around it, make a lot more questions to some of the cruise line executives. But what I say in the cruise industry, it's persistence, and persistence beats resistance every time. It's continuing to keep that dialogue going, being open and clear about what's happening. And then at the same time, you know, with persistence beats resistance, we are one of our very first meetings, and Linda will remember this. There's a gentleman, his name is Giora Israel, who's from Israel. He was one of the, senior executives at Carnival Corporation. And we sat down and had a meeting with him, and he
2017.
Yeah. And he just smiled at us and he said, Shannon, this is a long-term play and it is going to be a roller coaster ride. So get ready.
And he wasn't wrong, right?
He wasn't wrong.
He wasn't wrong.
With that understanding, when we first started, we got a lot of no's, a lot of not yets, but we kept moving forward and asking the questions and keeping the dialogue moving and keeping those channels of communication open. And in the beginning, everybody told us no, that we would never be able to bring a ship in that would do turnaround ports in Haifa Port, that was impossible. Everybody told us no. And then look what happened. We managed to bring, not only Royal Caribbean in, but Norwegian was doing some turns. And we've seen turns from a lot of different ships. We did have to take a step back, obviously, with the turmoil that is happening today. But those lines of communications, they are open, and we still are talking to the cruise line executives every day, and they're asking the questions because they want to come back.
Yeah, they absolutely want to come back. It's just a question of when.
And in the meantime, Haifa is still building its new terminal.
Thankfully, and they're really excited about that. And, one of the great things about Zohar in particular and the port in general is that, they've been really open with those plans, and they have asked the architects to share those plans with the cruise lines, because a lot of times what will happen is there will be an expansion project like this and things will get built and the cruise line will say, well, that's not going to work and this is why. And it's after the fact. So this is happening, in real time, where they can provide feedback and input and suggestions. And so it still remains, even in that sense, very much a partnership. There's still communication happening.
Cruising Fact File. The world's largest cruise ship, Royal Caribbean's Icon of the Seas, set sail from Miami in January 2024. soccer superstar Lionel Messi conducted the ceremonial bottle breaking and naming of the ship. Later in the summer, Utopia of the Seas will also join the fleet.
Viva, Norwegian Cruise Line's second Prima-class ship, was launched in December 2023. It'll spend the winter in San Juan, Puerto Rico, before arriving in the Mediterranean in April.
Two of Costa Cruises' newest ships, Venezia and Firenze, have transferred to Carnival Cruise Line under the concept Fun Italian Style.
Celebrity Ascent, which Celebrity Cruises launched in Fort Lauderdale in November 23, is the first ocean cruise line to earn the prestigious Forbes Travel Guide 4-Star Award.
Disney Cruise Line's sixth ship, the Disney Treasure, will launch at the end of 2024. It'll have a 1,270-seat theatre, a big-top cinema inspired by Dumbo, and a Haunted Mansion-themed bar.
Other launches in 2024 include Silversea Cruises' Silver Ray, TUI Cruises' Mein Schiff 7, and Virgin Voyages' Brilliant Lady. So, Mark, are you feeling regal?
I am feeling royally ready for an interview.
Well, why don't we get to it then?
Queens and princesses.
Princes and kings, actually. That's a very interesting thing. Why are ships female?
And some of them have godmothers as well.
It is interesting that we refer to ships and boats as she's.
Is it because they're strong, tough, reliable, and steer us through choppy waters?
Love it, that is so nice. The reason we're talking royal and regal is because our next guest basically represents royalty here in Israel.
Our next guest is going to tell us about two of the largest cruise lines out there, Princess Cruises and Cunard, which names all of its ships after queens.
And our guest is Marcy Goldstein. She is the Cruise Department Supervisor and Groups Manager with the Israel-based Med Cruises.
Med Cruises has been around for about 30 years. Originally, our CEO and owner got the rights to represent Carnival Cruise Line here in Israel about 30 years ago. And over time, the Carnival Cruise has become a corporation and has now a number of different brands. We sell 6 different cruise lines that all belong to the Carnival Corporation. And we're the official representative, and for some of them, we're the sole representative as well here in Israel.
It's been a tough few months in Israel towards the end of 2023. How do you see 2024 for the Israeli cruise market?
It's been very difficult for everyone. It's kind of a little bit hard to say with 2024. Things are still unfolding, things are still happening. On one hand, people are hesitant to travel, either because of what's happening here. People have people in the army. On the other hand, people are at the point maybe where they want to get away a little bit and have a bit of relief. We have seen in the last few weeks an upswing in calls and in people booking, either for later this year or for next year. It depends on a lot of factors. It's certainly picking up again from where it was a couple of months ago. We're waiting for flights to commence again, and since there are fewer flights now, that also affects our business. Hopefully more and more airlines will come back. People are anxious to go. They just a little bit are still hesitant and waiting to see. But what people are doing now, maybe even more so than in the past, because of what's happening, is getting cancellation insurance, whether from the cruise lines themselves. We have one cruise line that actually does offer it, or privately, just to have that added kind of cushion of comfort level that if something happens, I can cancel and I won't just lose all my money.
Here's a change of pace. My late, great, infamous Aunt Tilly swore, she swore regularly, but that's not what we're talking about on the podcast.
I like her already.
She was a character and a half. My God, the amount of money she lost playing bridge. You're getting the character. She swore by Cunard and she swore by the QE2. They were her go-to, and anything less than that, and she'd start complaining. So I've grown up with the names, the QE2, the Queen Mary, in my background. Is Cunard still that classic brand now in 2024?
On the one hand, absolutely. It's still kind of very regal, and the ships themselves are beautiful, and the design is very much regal, I would say. But they've also made a real effort to make it more modern. So it's not as formal, it's not as stiff. So you can find the luxury, you can find the British afternoon tea, all kinds of cultural events and lectures and things that are offered. But on the other hand, there are parties, and there are certainly many more young people than I think would have been on Cunard in the past. Families, certainly during the summer months. I've sailed on the Queen Mary too, and it is an absolutely beautiful ship. The Cunard ships are a bit different than other cruise ships because they're built as ocean liners. The structure and the design is a little bit different than other ships. They're kind of more long and narrow than wide, but they're designed so that people feel comfortable even when they're on a ship, say, for 5 or 6 or 7 days at a time crossing the Atlantic. There are all kinds of features that are specifically catered to that, to make you not feel claustrophobic and to just give a really amazing feeling.
Mark, before you ask the next question, and talking of English afternoon teas and my eccentric great aunt, Mark, I just want to make a public thank you to you, because Mark came here straight from an English style tea room in Jerusalem and bought me a big bag of scones or scones. So thank you, Mark, very much indeed.
A pleasure. There were 6. There are only 4 now.
It was a long drive.
So you mentioned the Queen Mary 2. What ships are you operating now, and are there plans for a Queen Camilla?
Good question.
That I couldn't tell you right now. But Cunard is actually very excited after having 3 ships in their fleet for many, many years. The new Queen Anne will be launched this spring. So she'll be the 4th Cunard ship now in the fleet, with all kinds of modern twists, but again, keeping it kind of classic in feel, modern as well. She'll be 113,000 tons, 14 decks. She'll be really very, very worthwhile.
9-hole golf course?
9 holes, I'm sorry, they couldn't fit them all in.
You also represent Princess Cruises. It's another very popular brand. How would you describe their offering in 2024?
Princess is very popular with our customers. We've got a very large base of loyal Princess customers who sail again and again and again on Princess. I myself have sailed on maybe 5 or 6 different ships of theirs, and it's really a wonderful company. There are sailings basically all over the world. For our customer base, there's a lot of Europe, either Northern Europe or the Mediterranean, as well as farther places. We have a lot who go to Alaska, Japan, Australia, and Princess is also going to have a new ship actually launching later this month called the Sun Princess.
What does the Sun Princess have to offer?
Sun Princess is a new class of ship. She's larger than the last 5 or 6 Princess ships that have been launched, with all kinds of new features, a very large atrium called the Dome, all kinds of new things, and it will have, different than other Princess ships, there's going to be a family zone. Much more family oriented with water slides, and it's much more kind of geared to families and children, which Princess was a little bit less so in the past. So we're looking very much forward to that ship. And then the Star Princess, which will be her sister ship, is coming out next year.
What's your thinking on the whole family versus maybe older people who want a quieter time?
Well, that's exactly the thing. It depends what you're looking for. Certainly in our market, the Israeli market is a lot of families going on vacation, and that is certainly something that families are interested in doing. It's a wonderful vacation for families, multi-generational families even, where you have the grandparents and the parents and the grandchildren, and everyone finds their own kind of niche of what they want to do on the ship, and so it's a really excellent way to travel for families. Traditionally, I think cruising was thought of maybe as more for older people, for couples, and that is certainly also an option. Part of that, I think, also has to do with the destinations. There are some destinations that are possibly a little bit less geared towards children. And if they're longer sailings, maybe that's, people who have a little bit more time, or people who can do that, or want to go somewhere that's more about the views and nature, and maybe less so if you've got children. There's something for everyone. It just depends what you're looking for. There are the different brands, different destinations, different times of year. Everyone can find something that works for them.
If people want to book with Med Cruises and find out about special offers, how do they do that?
Firstly, of course, you can always call our office. We have representatives who are all very well trained and versed in what we do. And that's, easy to do. 03-927-2727.
Let me just say that's an Israeli number.
Yes, that's the number here in Israel. We have a website that was actually just completely redone and revamped, med-cruises.com, where we show all of our brands, all of the fleets and the ships of each brand. You can see deck plans, you can see virtual tours. There are FAQ sections with a lot of information, a lot about destinations, and special offers there as well. That's a very good resource.
And is the website in Hebrew and English?
It's mostly in Hebrew, but some of it would be in English, or as I say, you can certainly call our office and any of our representatives converse in English. So,
Marcy Goldstein, Cruise Department Supervisor and Groups Manager at Meg Cruises, thank you very much for coming on the podcast.
It was my pleasure. Hopefully we'll see you on a cruise soon.
Hi, this is David Harris from the Jerusalem Post podcast Travel Edition. Find us on Facebook, Instagram and Twitter at MarkDavidPod or mail us at markdavidpod@gmail.com.
And now for something slightly different.
Completely different.
No, this is not Monty Python. This is our cruising special.
I'm very, very excited about this bit. We record the interviews ahead of time and then we stitch it all together, so we know what's coming ahead of time. And I am looking forward to listening to this podcast right now because this is going to be a lot of fun.
We decided to do a quickfire round, and some of you may say, I wish David and Mark would talk less and ask very short questions.
I've actually edited out most of the long questions. And I am mea culpa. It's me. I didn't get the concept that when you do quickfire, it has to be quick.
Yes, there were one or two times when we did this when I was going, David, 5 words, go.
And when I answered the questions for them, I've edited all of that out as well.
So hopefully now you've edited this. This should sound actually quite
I
interesting.
should edit this intro as well.
That's too much editing. We are going to go back to Linda and Shannon from Access Cruise Inc. and ask them a lot of very quick fire questions. We'll start with Linda and ask her, when was her first cruise?
When I signed on to the SS Norway in June of 1980. Yes, I'm that old.
I didn't realize 1980 was the first time she was on a ship.
Well, when was yours, Shannon?
It was in January of 1993 on the Sunward.
Your most recent cruise, Shannon.
I just got off a river cruise on Talc where we sailed from Munich to Budapest on down the Danube.
Next question. Shannon, favourite ship?
I don't know. I've been on so many different ships. I can't really say. I can say size. I prefer a smaller ship rather than a larger ship is what I can tell you. Based on my days of working on board ships, I enjoy getting to meet the other people on board. And when you're on a large ship, you might meet somebody on the first day and you never see them again. So for me, it's about the connection to the people. And I really enjoy that part of cruising. So small ships for me.
I can only speak from the perspective of a crew member, I think. And maybe not just a crew member. There's been a lot of passengers, or guests, I should say, who have an affinity and a great affection for one particular ship, for whatever reason that is. I have a particular affection for the Norway because you never forget your first, and she was my first. And there was a whole cult of people that cruised on the Norway year after year after year for 20 years. So if I was going to name a favorite ship, I don't know if it's a favorite, but I have a special affection for the Norway, which no longer exists. And if you're going to ask me about a large or a small ship, honestly, I'd prefer a small ship.
Linda, favorite destination?
Well, my favorite destination is a personal little destination. It's a tiny little island in the Bahamas where I can escape every year, and I go diving for conch and fishing for lobster, and I run around in shorts and a t-shirt and barefoot for a week or 2 weeks or a month or for however long I can get away.
You're not going to tell us the name of that little island, are you? It's your secret.
I'm almost afraid to tell you because the secret has already gotten out and it's been crazy. But the name of the island is Spanish Wells, and it is part of Eleuthera, but it is not on the island of Eleuthera.
Shannon, the best cruise excursion you've been on?
That's an unfair question. I don't know that there is a best shore excursion I've been on. I've been on a lot of shore excursions. I have a shore excursion company that I built. They're all so different. It really just depends on what it is that you want to do. I think about the time that I took Linda with me to Hawaii, and we did a flight over Kauai, around the island of Kauai. Look at her. She's already laughing, right? She's over there laughing because she knows what I'm going to say. And, I've been in the shore excursion side of the business for 30 plus years. So we get off and she's crying. And I'm like, oh my God, what happened? Are you okay? Are you okay? And she's like, it just brought me to tears, the beauty of the island and the shore excursions. I've never been on a helicopter.
It's really quite overwhelming. It's hard to describe what it is to sit in a helicopter hovering over these ancient volcanoes that have formed the island of Kauai. And it looks like Mother Nature and God and whoever you believe in took this giant, buckets of paint and spill these buckets of paint over these mountains and crevices. It's just breathtaking in ways I can't describe.
Let's go with Shannon again. Best specialty restaurant, please.
We were on the Seabourn Ovation, I think 2 or 3 years ago, and I was with my son and my mother-in-law, and I think we kept going to the sushi restaurant on board. I think we were there like every day, either for lunch or dinner. So that was probably one of my favorites. But the other ones, there's always great restaurants on board. I think back to when I was first on board Norwegian, the big thing was to go to the bistro all the time before look at Linda, she's shaking her head. Yes, because our experiences both with Norwegian Cruise Line. But I mean, that was a big deal to go to the alternative restaurant, the bistro. And I have such fond memories of always going to the bistro too.
Linda, the worst sort of cruise passenger.
Oh, gosh. I think it's just the one that just does not respect the fact that they're not alone in that cruise experience, the one that just lacks basic respect and kindness. And I guess you encounter those people everywhere, but it's just the person who doesn't consider the fact that they are sharing the space and the experience with many other people.
Yeah, I think that sometimes you get the complainers on board. I remember I always felt bad. These people, but no matter what you do, you couldn't make them happy. It was just something in them that you could roll out the red carpet for them and they would say, well, I see a little spot there. They would find something, right? And those are the ones, but it's more so that those are the ones that sometimes can ruin others' vacations just because they don't keep it to themselves, right? They want to share. Those are the ones that are the most challenging, I would say.
And someone who is disrespectful and unkind to a crew member. That is the one that that's the deal breaker for me.
That would be Mark.
I'm very well behaved.
Moving swiftly on. Okay, Linda, river cruises, yay or nay?
I have not been on one. I am dying to go on one because it speaks to all of the things that I love. The smaller sort of ship experience, the destination that's off the beaten path. It's on my bucket list. So I can't speak to it, but Shannon was just on a river cruise and she could probably give you some.
I'm a big yay. I loved it. It's completely different than ocean cruising, but I loved every minute of it. I loved that it was only 100 people. I loved the intimacy of it. I loved getting to know all the passengers on board. It was a really wonderful experience.
Where were you?
Munich to Budapest. I was listening.
Did you say it?
Yes.
Paying attention.
I didn't hear. I really didn't hear.
Sorry, I apologise for my colleague who doesn't actually listen.
I was waiting to hear the Mekong or something,
He was directing traffic, wasn't he, Mark?
Yeah.
He's one of those cruise passengers that's just all about himself.
You want me to leave this bit in, don't you?
No.
We did the holiday cruise markets from Munich down to Budapest. It was fabulous.
Somewhere you've not been, you still want to visit. Shannon.
Australia, New Zealand.
In the old days, people would show up in the tux and bow tie, and the ladies would come in gorgeous cocktail or evening dresses. Is that what you like, you enjoy, or you think that the informal is where it is?
You're not getting this quickfire thing, are you? It's 6 words.
Okay.
5 words. Formal or casual dress codes, and then a name. 6 words. Come on.
Formal or casual dress codes, and then a name.
Which name?
Well, exactly. I don't know. He told me to say that. Okay.
I will move this convo forward. How's that?
Go for it.
I am for classy casual.
I like a good formal night. Just one. The rest of the time casual. I find it fun. Makes it special.
One thing you want to change about cruising, Linda?
I would really love for the media to understand and maybe not be quite so biased about the industry, as a whole, as it relates to the environment, as it relates to its health and sanitation standards. I mean, if I didn't know anything about the industry, I'd say, ugh, you remember the whole COVID thing, like, oh God, everybody's in this petri dish and everybody's getting sick. Well, we didn't know what we were dealing with back then, but I have to tell you, Shannon and I, that whole thing with COVID, wash your hands, that is an old thing for us. We have had drilled in our heads, wash your hands, wash your hands, wash your hands and sanitize from the day we walked on ships all those years ago. So I'd love for the media perception to change. I know that wasn't a quick answer, but
I agree.
You can finish off, David. 4 words and a name. Go.
A funny cruise story. First Shannon, then Linda.
Oh my goodness. I'll give you 2 examples that happened. I remember in Bermuda, we had a couple that got into a giant fight and started throwing each other's suitcases overboard. And then on another ship, when a man showed up with his wife and his mistress on the same cruise on his honeymoon, that turned out really interesting too. So
that's awesome. I've not come across that one yet.
Yeah. And we were out of Boston.
Was that
all
an
ships
accident?
too.
Did you do it by accident? You forgot?
It was not. It was not. My room as a cruise director was right next to the front desk. So when I came out of my room, the gentleman that was at the front desk was known to be a ladies' man. And so I said to him, as this woman's throwing things around the lobby, I said, "What'd you do this time?" And he kind of looked at me and gave me the eye roll. And he said, "Well, she wants the cabin number of her husband's mistress who's on board because he didn't show up last night and she's here on her honeymoon."
Linda, beat that.
I don't know that I can beat that, but I remember when I was on one of we used to call the white ships, and my next door neighbor was the shore excursion manager. And he, funny enough, was from Australia. And he used to entertain ladies on a regular basis. And I would have to get up very early in the morning because I was the crew purser, which is essentially the HR manager on board the ship. I'd be sound asleep and I'd hear all kinds of noise and terrible, terrible music through the walls that are very thin. And this went on for 2 or 3 nights. And when I went to work the next day and he was behind the shore excursion desk with his eyes really red at half mast, I threw, back in those days, it was a tape, right? A cassette tape back in those days. I threw a cassette tape on the Shorex desk and I said, "Listen, if you're going to do that until 2 or 3 o'clock in the morning, at least play some good music." And I gave him a tape. And that was probably one of the last times he did that until 2 or 3 in the morning. It wasn't the last time he did it, but I think he curbed his hours. How's that for a good one?
At least while you were next door neighbors.
At least while I was next door neighbors. Once I transferred to another ship, I washed my hands of it. How was that for a good one? Will you keep that one in or take it out?
Definitely keeping in. Definitely.
Oh, good stuff. I think we better end because we could go on all day. I mean, there are some.
That's what she was thinking about her neighbor.
I'm sure we'll find a lot more stories.
Exactly.
Maybe we should do a special going forward, a cruise special next year, just funny stories.
All for it. All for it.
Where can people find out more about Access Cruise?
Shannon?
Just contact Shannon or Linda. Of course, you can go to our website, which is accesscruiseinc.com. But Linda and I are easily accessible. And so we would love to hear from anybody. Our emails are just our first name at accesscruiseinc.com.
We're also on LinkedIn.
And I have to also say that, Shannon, you do amazing videos about the industry as well. And folks, you can find those on LinkedIn as well.
Oh, thank you. Our take on cruise.
Are the videos on YouTube?
They are about to go public. We have just loaded over about 150 videos from the last 3 years that we've been doing. So we've got all the content there. So we're about to make it public and then start, loading our videos there every week. Also, our take on cruise.
Shannon McKee and Linda Vasquez from Access Cruise Inc. Thank you so much for entertaining us.
Thank you. This has been fun.
Lots of fun.
I think, Mark, at some point, you and I should try the quickfire round. Maybe if a guest cancels on us, we could actually fill that space with doing a quickfire. You know, you ask 5 questions of me, and I'll ask 5 questions of you, or is this a really bad idea?
Can you do quickfire, David? I mean, it's a lovely idea, but you don't half go on.
We can give it a go. But before Mark and I record any quickfire with ourselves, we owe a great debt of thank you to all of our guests on this week's pod.
To Al, to Marcy, to Shannon, and to Linda.
You made it a wonderful podcast. This, our annual cruising podcast, each year gets amongst the biggest listens, likes, and shares. Talking of which,
if you enjoyed this podcast, or even if you didn't enjoy this podcast, please share it with your friends. Please review it, give it a very positive view, give it 5 stars, and just generally put the word out there that Mark and David's podcast on the Jerusalem Post podcast section is great.
And of course, you can find it not just on jpost.com, but on your favourite podcast provider. And that means you can also follow and like.
If you want to write to us, our email is markdavidpod@gmail.com. And you can also contact us through our Facebook page, Mark and David's Travels, and through Instagram. But I don't think we're on TikTok, are we? Because we're too old for TikTok.
Just look for @MarkDavidPod across social media. Mark, before we make any more mistakes, faux pas, or say anything else that we might regret beyond what we've already said, should we say goodbye?
You got that wrong. Can I just say?
How?
Talking of no more mistakes.
What? Oh, yeah.
Well,
Oh, Lord, let's just say goodbye.
Goodbye.
Goodbye.